Right. Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today at PureCyber Ignite. We've got a webinar today just to kind of run through cyber trends, some cases that we've seen, and to provide you with all a bit of user awareness around the industry and what we're seeing at the moment. We've had over 600 registered attendees for today, which is fantastic, which is why we wanted to kind of wait because we can hear the dinging in our ear whenever anyone joins now. Bit of housekeeping stuff to kind of go over with you all. So because there are quite a lot of attendees, if you've got any questions, anything you want to ask, if you can use the Q&A function within the Teams channel, that would be absolutely great. Throughout the presentation, we'll be setting you up with various questions. And off the back of that, anyone who answers quickly and answers first will be entered into a prize draw. I don't know if anyone's seen our social media posts recently around all of this, but PureCyber Ignite is our event to support Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Today, we'll discuss, as I said, some real life cases that we've seen, some cyber trends that Matt's seeing within his team and Tom sees within his. And as there is quite a split in the audience level today, we have some who are quite technical, we have some who are more employee level. We will be trying to balance our guidance and advice to both user awareness and also to a business perspective as well. So I hope that's all okay. But as I said, any questions that you've got coming up, then please do let us know through that channel. So coming through as in a bit of agenda, as I said, we're going to look at fiction versus reality. We're going to look at recent cases that the team have seen at PureCyber. We're going to look at cyber trends, and then we'll recap it all and provide you a bit of guidance and advice as to what to do from a next step perspective. So just as an introduction to ourselves, so I'm John. I'm the Chief Information Risk Officer at PureCyber, and I've got my colleague, Matt.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt. I'm the Chief Defensive Security Officer, so I look after the 24/7 security operations team. And Tom?
And yeah, I'm Tom. I'm our Chief Offensive Security Officer, so Matt's alter ego. And my job and my team's job is to actively attack our customers to hopefully find their weaknesses before the bad guys do.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And for anyone who doesn't know PureCyber, so we're an award-winning cybersecurity company. As I said, you've got the three team who are the management of our three key pillars. So the governance side of things, the defensive and the offensive. And our job is, protecting people against cyber threats, giving you the tools to safeguard yourself and your business. And that's what we're going to look at today. Is understanding exactly what you can do to protect yourselves and protect your businesses. So as I alluded to earlier, our recent social media campaign, so PureCyber, is all about fighting back. Cyber attacks are on the rise. There's more businesses experiencing breaches than before, and we want to empower all of you on the webinar today to become cyber champions for your organization and for yourselves. So giving you the power to then go and help to kind of create this genuine shift in user awareness and to build up as the frontliner defense against cyber attacks. As I said, the whole purpose for the start of this is to kind of look at the fiction and the reality. So when you look at cybersecurity within the fiction, so within films, within the media, it's very romanticized. It's probably a wrong word, glamorized. It's very, very sort of impactful, and you only really hear about the really high-end security attacks within media. Now, what we're trying to demonstrate today is the reality of it and how it affects businesses of every size, whether they're small, medium, large, international organizations, and how they also impact the individuals as well. So we've got a little clip to kind of give you an insight in from the fiction point of view. So hopefully this all plays correctly.
It's a Unix system. I know this. Got it.
Tonight, a massive data breach of 73 million current and former AT&T customers to tell you about.
What could be one of the largest data breaches in history.
The UK Electoral Commission has revealed it's been the subject of a complex cyber attack.
So as you can see with those, from what we see at PureCyber, I imagine a lot of the attackers don't sit there twirling pens, calling themselves invincible like Boris from GoldenEye. And we see a little bit more of a reality side of things, which is what we wanted to share with you today, because when you boil down every sort of cybersecurity attack, because cybercrime is the number one risk to businesses, regardless of size, you kind of see, I suppose, four levels from a business perspective, which are detailed there for you to see, and you see impacts from a personal perspective as well. And this is generally what happens with a cybersecurity attack. Now, examples that I can think of that play into this that we've seen here, there was a recruitment company that got breached recently, or recently was last year now. And from that, you saw a lot of personal information being exposed. You saw data being provided to other cyber criminals. And you also saw that they had sort of reputational harm, and for their services were sort of interrupted, and they had a sort of inability to win new clients from off the back of it. Another example we saw was an IT company that got impacted, and that spread to their customers and their clients as well. Now, that provided them with service interruption, reputational harm, inability to, again, win that customer sort of experience side of things over, but also the IT company, the people who were involved in that incident, and Matt will remember this as well, because we're heavily involved in those calls. They had a lot of those personal issues that came off the back of it from having that longevity of an attack, having that sort of being down in the trenches is probably the best way of putting it, isn't it? So when you look at the cases that we're involved in now, it shows that it's always based around this, and that's what we want to kind of get over today with these cases. So that you're not listening to me for the entire time, because it's important to speak to and listen to Matt and Tom, because they have a real insight into this, because they're getting involved in this on a daily basis. We've got case one, which is all around QR codes. So I'll flash up the next slide. Matt, do you want to take over and talk through the QR case that you're involved in?
Yeah, thank you, John. So yeah, QR code phishing, or quishing as the kind of new keyword as it's being called now, and something that's becoming a lot more common over the last 6 to 12 months. And we're going to go over a case that we were recently on and had to investigate on behalf of a company, where it started where just a normal employee went to go and see a client on that day, and obviously they've gone to pay for parking, and it's a standard where I don't know if anyone here has seen it, but somebody put a sticker over the QR code. So when they've gone to kind of scan it, they didn't notice it. It took them to a very similar page to the parking software. So it had similar logos, but a little bit different. It had kind of the whole website had the feeling of what they should have probably expected, but because we were also in a rush, and we later kind of knew, they just didn't really pick up on those little kind of key factors. So they went through the website and entered kind of the information needed to pay for parking. That included their email address. So in this case, they used their business email to kind of get the receipt. They used a password, which we later found out was one they were using across different applications. They used their normal address for the office. They used their own actual debit card to pay because they weren't given a business one, and then used their own mobile number. So this member of staff, as I just said, was in quite a bit of a rush to get to his meeting, and he then received another email to go, payment failed, sign in with Microsoft. He obviously then signed in. That he then entered his business email, password, and then it asked for his MFA. So once he gave away all of those kind of credentials, the attackers pretty much had his session. Once then they had all that information, and unfortunately for him, this was a series of really unlucky events. They removed or took a couple of £100 from the employee's account, and also because they had full access into the email address, they actually started to send thousands of emails to all of his contacts, and that included everyone internally, so members of staff, to the actual clients of his, because he'd be emailing them day in, day out. So really, there was other kind of impact to this. So the employee also had access to really sensitive information due to a project he was on, and because the attacker had full access to his OneDrive and SharePoint, they were able to download those files. And we also saw that the company, to really contain the event, because they just got overloaded in terms of an IT point of view, they blocked all outbound emails to everywhere, right? So they couldn't send emails to any clients, just to really contain, because multiple people got affected by this, which then meant they couldn't do their day-to-day job, impacting kind of uptime of the services and really reducing the revenue they could have earned. And then months later, we actually saw those files being uploaded to the dark web. So those were sitting there for anybody to download.
Well, that's a lot to digest in terms of sort of one simple act of kind of putting a sticker over another sticker, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think from your perspective then, Matt, and something I think would be really interesting to hear. I mean, what sort of the key impact areas for that? Because as I said, there's a lot going on there. But what are the key impact areas from a personal and a business perspective?
There is. There's three areas really we can kind of put it down to. One of them being financial loss, which is really one of the biggest impacts here. The employee lost his own money. It wasn't the company's, right? Which is going to hit home quite a bit. And then you also have the indirect losses, which the company had obviously lost revenue from that day. They couldn't do work needed against their timelines. There's also something that people forget most of the time is reputational damage. So when those emails were going out from that employee pretending to be somebody with a malicious link to all of their clients, that's gone. That's broken, that trust now. So whether those clients will trust them again going forward, it really it breaks that kind of the trust overall. And then the legal and compliance view on this. So unfortunately for the company, they did enter kind of legal. Well, they got sued because when the files got uploaded to the dark web, they were exposed publicly, which broke their contracts and NDAs they had in place.
Yeah, it's a massive impact from the business, isn't it? And also from a personal.
Yeah.
Now, I think, Tom, with your side of things now, because I think it'd be really interesting to get your take, because I know this is sort of some of the offensive work that you try and do for customers as well. I mean, we've got a few slides here that kind of demonstrate what happens from a QR perspective. What would you, I mean, do you want to talk through these? Do you want to talk about sort of preventative measures as well with it?
Yeah, I think this one was a really interesting scam or confidence trick, really, because a lot went wrong from both a business perspective and from the perspective of the actual employee or the individual. There were failings on both parts, and arguably not one person should take all the blame for this, even though it may have started with one person. Yes, you think right back to the very beginning, they turned up in the car park to book their parking, and they walked up to the sign and they scanned the QR code. And by doing that series of actions, effectively they've given the control to a third party, in this case the attacker, the person who put the sticker on the sign with the QR code, whereas that employee actually could have retained complete control of what they were doing. And the sign actually signposts this right to the left hand side. You can see there, hopefully, the indication that you can go and download an application from either the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. That would have taken you to the legitimate parking application. And that would have meant that actually you as an employee or as an individual retained complete control. So you've gone directly to the source of the parking company to be able to do that that interaction. So that was the first failure for the employee. Obviously, once they'd scanned the QR code, they'd already slightly lost the battle, if we're being truthfully honest. And they were then presented with a page that looks something like this. These are a couple of the examples that we've seen and dealt with, but effectively mock-ups or exact copies of real parking applications. But in this case, instead of actually paying for your parking, all of these details are gathered and consumed by the attackers. Whether they use them directly now or whether they use them in downstream attacks is a different question. So there's a couple of key bits to point out on here that we've seen in the real world. And I think the key one actually to look at is the credit card details, or in this case, the debit card details. A lot of people are quite blasé where they put their payment details in online thinking, well, what's the worst case that happens? I lose a little bit of money. But actually, it's a lot worse than that. And the main reason why is your card number itself brings you back to a financial institution such as your bank. And if you've given away an email address or a telephone number as part of that same registration form, we've actually seen examples where people have gone from this as just I put my credit card number into a random website. And it's actually been followed up by further attacks pretending to be your bank, which then have caused further downstream issues. Even as Matt said in his example, there was the user in this case actually used the same password for registering for their parking sort of log on and subscription as they do for their day-to-day user account. So we can see actually taking that exact same username and password and reusing them for things like Microsoft 365 or Google G Suite may actually allow an attacker to instantly breach the organization. So this is very quickly moving from a personal impact now to a business impact, and arguably it's still the same attack stream. But actually, we're really thankful. Most businesses now have started to deploy multi-factor authentication across the board for all their staff. And that provides a huge defensive barrier, really, for businesses, because it doesn't just mean if your credentials are exposed, you're breached. It actually means that you can sort of have a little bit of resilience, that actually there's that additional control in place to prevent access. But the problem is some businesses are lazy, and that's probably the horrible way of putting it. But you do occasionally get CEOs or CFOs saying, well, I just don't want the hassle of having to enter a code all the time. And there are some things within particularly Microsoft 365, but also other providers where you can selectively deploy multi-factor authentication. And in this example, this particular company that was breached, their IT department had actually made some exceptions. So if you were logging on to your emails or Teams, for example, from an iPhone or from an Android device, MFA wasn't required. And an attacker can take those credentials and they can work out if MFA is enforced across all access mechanisms or whether or not there's any sort of gap, should we say, in the armor. And actually, in this case, they found those gaps and they used the credentials that they'd stolen from that parking website to be able to breach into, this case, a 365 tenancy, whereas Matt said they had access to the entire SharePoint for the company, access to all of the files, the sensitive documents, the emails, and effectively could impersonate that member of staff for as long as they needed.
Yeah, no, that's really good, really helpful, Tom. Just to kind of see it in that linear view of what can happen. Before we go into any more of the sort of a user awareness side of things that Tom's going to lead on, Matt, was there anything that, I suppose obviously we step back and we see quite a lot of this daily basis, don't we? Especially with your team in the SOC. Is there anything that the sort of you have within your armory that would have prevented this, would have actually would help to identify it?
Yeah, as a kind of a SOC, we monitor a lot of kind of the M365 point of view. So there's some really key things we would probably pick up on here. Those would include, most of the time these systems are hosted in some sort of data center. So that login taking place from a kind of data center IP to us, that's really weird. We don't really see a lot of that from a kind of email point of view. And also, it would usually take place outside the UK. So if especially a company where most of their kind of users are based here and don't really move around a lot, that would have been kind of generating an alert straight off the back. And then it's all that activity that surrounded this, everything from them integrating really. So they integrated like a third-party email system to send those thousands of emails. So we would have seen that integration. We would have seen the rules being set up. We would have seen anything they were really doing on that account, especially like the downloading of the documents. We would have had kind of full visibility there.
Awesome, brilliant. Now I know we've just had a question through in the chat as well, which so the question, if anyone can see it, is what is MFA? So as Tom goes through now and starts to talk around his user awareness piece and what you could do from a user perspective as opposed to what Matt's gone through there as a business, he'll incorporate in the MFA. So Tom, when you get to that section, if you can just reference that as well, if that's all right. Yeah,
Cool. No problem.
Perfect. Brilliant. So as it's one of his favorite topics, we thought we'd bring him in for this one. So Tom, can you kind of go through and talk to us about, obviously this is where Matt's coming with the QR codes, the phishing side of things?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think it's probably worth just stepping back a touch a little bit and actually talking about how the majority of cyber breaches occur. Even we're in 2024 now, and cyber like it or not, has been around for multiple decades. In fact, it's probably been around ever since we started joining computer systems together so they could talk. And in fact, scams and ways of reaching or stealing information are not new. Phishing probably started decades ago, where you would have thought about traditional scams like your Nigerian prince scam, where somebody's trying to send you money and all they want is you to send them money in return as a way of like a transfer fee. Those were the really sort of simple, easy to spot phishing simulations or phishing scams where people were trying to actually get money out of you. But over time, as IT systems and environments have become more complex, so have the tricks that the attackers are using. Just recently, we saw the huge takeoff in things like generative AI as a method of making things easier and quicker to generate and produce. So we've actually seen, even the last couple of years, phishing simulations becoming more and more convincing, because actually it's no longer a user probably from China, Russia, India, or some of probably where English is not a first language producing them. It's now a computer helping to produce them. So we're starting to see them get better and better and harder to spot. But fundamentally, a phishing scam hasn't changed right from the very beginning. It is still a malicious email. And normally that will say it's come from a trusted source. It's going to pretend to have come from someone like Microsoft or someone that you know. And the whole aim of that is to get you as an individual to do something or reveal some information that the attacker can use for some sort of downstream attacks. And that's what phishing has always been. Nothing's really changed there. But actually, over the last couple of years, we've seen a huge sort of sway in how phishing is delivered. It used to be by email only, but today we're actually seeing phishing campaigns originate through different communication mechanisms. Smishing now is a big one, and we saw a huge amount of smishing during the COVID-19 pandemic, where people were being sent text messages around fake COVID-19 test results or things like that. And we see a lot of these around the Christmas time where people are ordering parcels. So we see them from DPD, UPS, etc. And the whole idea here of the smishing attack, once again, is to probably gather more information, your name, your address, your credit card numbers, etc., so they can use those for further downstream attacks. But then if you're being targeted, you might get other things like vishing, which is where somebody will pick up the phone and call you. Taking this into the real world. And we've seen examples of this recently where those have both been individuals and humans on the other end of the line trying to trick you, but also AI bots, which are literally talking to you through a telephone line, which is some really interesting attacks that are happening. And as Matt said right at the very beginning, we also have quishing, which is another horrible term, but effectively the term for QR code phishing, which is where people are scanning QR codes that lead them to places that are not as trusted. So we've seen this on parking signs. We see this in presentations like today. So if you see any QR codes, always just think, where is this QR code taking us? It doesn't mean we can't deal with those QR codes. It doesn't mean we can't click on links, so to speak. But it's all about having that doubt in your mind that, are you in the right place? Can you trust what you're doing?
I seem to get a lot about hair growth treatment, so maybe they're starting to target me with the phishing side. Tom, we've had a question that's just popped up in the Q&A section as well around the MFA. So reverting back to case study, the case one that we went through, the QR code, and MFA not being on, not being off. Can you just clarify what you meant with that? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. So when you, in some applications, it is very much an on or off feature. So, for example, you can turn multi-factor authentication, which is where you get that prompt on your mobile phone or a 6-digit code generated, which you use when you log in. Now, in some situations, it's simply on or off. And actually, those are probably, I say, the most secure deployments. But in reality, the more complex an application becomes, and you look at something like Microsoft 365, on or off might not be the only setting that people want. So commonly businesses, for example, might have an office, and they may want to say that if you're in the office, you're not going to get that prompt. But if you're working remotely, you may get that prompt. So you can actually apply a bit more logic to when that MFA prompt is triggered. And in this particular case that we were looking at, the IT administrator has actually made an exception to that. So if you were connecting from an iPhone or an Android phone, that didn't prompt for an MFA token, whereas if you were connecting from, say, a Windows or a Mac device, it would have done. So a subtle little gap, so to speak, in the armor was enough to effectively bypass or find a hole in that security technique.
Like we always say, there's no one technology or control that's fully foolproof, is there? It's all about how you apply it in the real world and what you do with it.
Yeah, and I think the lifestyle of all of these controls is constantly changing. If you look back about a year when you used to do Microsoft 365 authentication tokens, which is multi-factor authentication, it simply used to pop up on your phone and ask you to press approve or deny. That was the interaction. And if you look at it today, it now asks you to put in a number that you can see on your screen. That change happened because there was an attack known as fatigue. And basically somebody would just keep putting that token back in front of you, asking you to approve or deny. And eventually somebody would get bored of pressing deny and just press approve to make that alert go away. And once again, it was one of those social engineering tricks that only failed because humans were in the loop, but actually was happening in reality. So the whole system was sort of, I think, redesigned and changed slightly to make it more secure and less fallible to that type of attack. And we're going to see this on and on again in terms of slight changes to tweak the systems we use to make them more and more secure.
That's perfect. Thanks for clarifying that, Tom. So I suppose next up on our journey through this, and as Tom said there, if you've got from a phishing simulation or you're a phishing attack, sorry, and you don't understand whether it's real, whether it's not, then the benefit there is always just going straight to that source and looping background, going to that trusted place that you've been to multiple times and seeing, going to the source of the truth rather than relying on what's in front of you as well. From a quiz time perspective, because I know you're all really excited about going through the quiz and having a Brucey bonus opportunity, we're going to pop it into the chat now as well, I believe, into the Q&A section. So fastest fingers on the buttons, that side of things, is what do we call a phishing attempt using a QR code? I'll give you a minute, and Tom and Matt, you're not allowed. There you go. First person in. That was very quick. Congratulations. So we'll move our way through now and kind of look at it a bit more. So Tom, we're going to come back to you, and again this will help to clarify the earlier question as well around password management and MFA as well. So do you want to take it away with your passwords?
I
Not your
love
passwords
this slide.
personally, but
I love this because it's actually one of the things that is really good. If you can stand in front of a room of people like we've got today, I know we can't see everybody on their cameras, but I'm really interested to know at the end how many people put their head in their hands after this section. But we've already talked about phishing being probably one of the biggest ways that organizations end up getting breached, because they effectively give away the keys to the kingdom via that phishing lure to begin with. But the second way that most accounts get breached are because people do things wrong, and passwords is probably the key area where that occurs. We often create passwords from things that are familiar to us. We choose the names of our pets, our partners, our children. We use dates that are familiar to us, the date we got born, the date we got married, etc. Any of those things that are familiar to us, we use those when we create passwords. Now, any of that information probably can be found out from your social media presence. So thinking about things like who your partners are, we can probably find from your Facebook profile if you were being directly targeted. But even if that's not the case, so we start off with a password that is secure. Let's just take in my example here, the word elephant, and you go to register with a service, and the service responds to you and says, sorry, the password you've chosen is not secure. Because humans are predictable, if they ask you to add a number to your password, the majority of people are going to choose the number one. It's about 68 to 70% of people will choose the number one. A large group of the remaining individuals will actually choose the current date, so either the month or the year, and just simply append that to the end of their password. So you can see here we've got elephant1 as an example. And if that's not secure enough, and you do need to add things like special characters, well, we've already hovered our hand over the number one on the keyboard. Why don't we just press the shift key and this time add an exclamation mark to the end? And these are patterns that we're seeing regularly, not just in terms of data breaches where data has been exposed, But actually, we're seeing regularly on things like pen test engagements where we're capturing users' passwords, and we're seeing this in reality. So if anybody's following that sort of guidance we just talked about, where you're putting a number 1 and possibly an exclamation mark at the end of your password, I'd probably think twice about doing that. That probably brings us on to the question, though, of, well, how do you create secure passwords? And the honest answer is you don't. Humans are absolutely terrible at producing secure passwords. It's not in our forte. So why don't we relieve this to the technology? You can have dedicated password managers, like two we've shown on the screen here, Bitwarden and 1Password, are solutions that allow you to not only generate secure passwords, but also store them and bring them back to you at the point where you need them. But you don't actually have to go for third-party solutions. I'm assuming everybody on the call has used a web browser, Google Chrome, Firefox, or Edge, or probably even more of you than that have got mobile phones. You've got iPhones or Android phones. All of these come with built-in password managers. And you've probably all seen it pop up saying, do you want us to generate or save this password for you? The answer to that always should be yes. Let the computers do the work for you. And that way you're ultimately going to have more secure passwords for all of those services. And probably most important, you're going to have a different password for each service, which means a breach of one does not end up being a breach of all.
Yeah, which is exactly what happened with that first case that we looked at, isn't it? Of having that password reuse across multiple sites. No, that's great, Tom, and it gives us a real insight into the sort of a user awareness piece for everyone involved. So second quiz time, I'm going to call it a Brucey bonus again because I can't think of any other presenters who hosted quiz shows apart from Bruce Forsyth anymore. So this one's going to pop into the Q&A chat now of what's the most common symbol used at the end of passwords. That was very quick. It's almost like somebody was hovering over writing their password and then that was just the one they clicked. Perfect, that's great. So we'll move on to the second case that we've seen, from conscious of time and making sure we fit in a lot about these cyber trends as well. So the second case we saw, which brings in a lot of what sort of Tom said from a general user awareness point of view, was we had a CFO for a London financial organization who was, to put it lightly, very flash with their sort of posting on social media. And for one day, they put a post up on a boarding pass with their details of where they were going, flight times, flight numbers, or everything basically, just kind of like show off. Now, because this firm were being targeted by cyber attackers, and they didn't have I suppose the person in question didn't have the sort of right privacy settings on their social media. The attackers were able to see that, gain advantage, and then use that to their advantage by creating a social engineering campaign targeted at their staff. So as you can see from this email here, it was a very sort of well-crafted phishing email that I sent in saying, look, just had an email from this company. They've changed their bank details. And then it goes on to give a story about that individual who was being flashed on social media. And because the context was right, because it felt right, because it felt a very natural email, and like Tom said earlier, not like the Nigerian prince is going to send you money, it became believable. And then as the CFO was in the air on the flight, that's when the money was transferred. So by the time they'd taken off and landed, the money had gone from that organization. Now, it's something that we see quite a lot. And I know, Matt, when we go through the cyber trends in a bit, you can chat through one of the recent examples that you've been involved with from an instant perspective. But it just kind of goes to show that there are ways that it can be prevented. Now, a lot of companies and a lot of businesses, a lot of people nowadays will do sort of verification checks if there's a change of bank account details. So ringing up that company, and again, not using the number that's on the email itself that comes in, but ringing up the company from a known number that's, you use a search engine for. Again, increased scrutiny of a false phishing email, like Tom went through earlier, of having various sort of checks that you have in place. The one that I've come across recently as an anagram is SLAM, so that sender, link, attachment, and message, which I think is a good one to think of from a phishing perspective. So check the sender, check if there's any links, check attachments, whether they're dodgy, and check whether the tone of a message is right. And then you can have things like implementing a strong and clear social media policy. So within the business itself, making sure that people are aware of what they actually post on social media, whether they link it to the company or not, or whether there's a flat out rule to say, look, on any social media sites, LinkedIn is a bit of a grey area, but for all of the others, don't reference for your working as part of this company. Give a bit of protection back. And this video that we'll show now, it highlights that in a great way. So the people who you'll see in the van, they are skilled, but this is something that is quite common to see when a cyber attacker is trying to create a social footprint on somebody. Let's go through this so you can understand exactly how this would have worked.
Oh, hi, can I help?
Hot chocolate.
What's the name?
Joelle.
What was the name?
Alex.
Alex. There you go, Johnny.
Cheers.
If you like our Facebook page, we give you a free hot drink and a free pastry.
We have a new like for Damien. We have a new like for Damien.
Hey, Carly, are you standing by?
Standing by. Hi there, can I help?
Yeah, I just liked your Facebook page.
Okay, I'll search Facebook now.
I'm searching Google.
Have a phone number.
I've got his email address.
Okay, Carly, are you ready?
For information on Damien.
Yep, I am.
Mother's maiden name is he banks with
Carly, this is the girl coming in now with the blue scarf.
What's the name? Nicholas.
Nicola. His date of birth, 7th May. She lives at 38A.
Just be a couple of seconds.
2 children, age 4 and 6. Previous address. She's got the postcode.
Yep, got it. Damien, age 26 and a fitness instructor.
How do you know what that?
Brody, who goes to UCL. Martin, who went to South Thames College. Assistant psychologist at Great Ormond Street.
I don't understand.
Oh, better.
You know I'm a Christian as well.
Oh, yeah, we know everything about you, Martin. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Anna from Russia.
Especially like the guy as he walks up a coffee shop just looking absolutely petrified. But it just goes to show that the stuff that you do online, it can have a massive impact on what people can see about you. So having things like your privacy settings set correctly, having things like MFA, not putting too much information out on there. We were chatting about this yesterday, weren't we, Matt, around what you do in real life, what you do on social media, but also you don't put stuff like I'm about to go on holiday for 3 weeks on there, because that's when a burglar strikes, right?
Exactly. It's that same concept, really, and people forget the difference between, well, there is no difference, but people think there's a difference between business and personal. But if you're going to do it for Facebook or whatever the case is, because we've learned now not to say we're going on holidays and these dates and there's no one at the house or whatever it is, we need to apply that same logic really to LinkedIn, right? A lot of people might expose too much on LinkedIn because they see it as more of a working thing, but you do see it a lot of the time where there's just an oversharing and you can work a lot off kind of that platform.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. And again, another time for a Brucey bonus. From a quiz time perspective, I'm just going to have to think of another presenter now, aren't I? Name one thing that you can do on social media to limit the attacks of a cyber attack, or limit the risks, of a cyber attack. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of answers coming in there, which is absolutely great. Obviously, we've talked about two cases that we've been involved in recently. What we kind of just want to touch on as well is the wider issues that we see within sort of a cyber world, cyber trends that we see on a daily basis. Now, I think we'll go Tom first. That's okay. And Tom, if you can explain sort of what these are and how they're intrinsically linked, and then we can flip over to Matt and he can chat through sort of his involvement in them, and what he sees. And again, probably another couple of cases will come out from that as well.
Yeah, of course. I think if I was being truthfully honest, cyber trends haven't changed a huge amount over the last decade. All that's happened is they've become more prominent and they've got better. I mean, these attacks never get worse, they only get better or more convincing. And that's happened because arguably the barrier or the threshold of detection has gone up. And that's a great thing. everybody on this call today, if I'd put this meeting out 5 years ago, probably wouldn't have turned up because cyber wouldn't have even been on the radar. So the fact that people are becoming more aware of cyber risks means that the attackers are having to get better and better daily, which means arguably, even though companies still do fall for things, we're in a much better position. From our point, though, there are three main, I'm going to call them risks or trends that we're seeing with companies that are getting breached. I mean, the first element is what we refer to as email compromise or account compromise. We've recently moved as a transition from what we refer to as on-premise technology to now using things in the cloud. So we used to have everything in an office. The pandemic changed that, and everybody started working remotely. And suddenly, the whole IT infrastructure really turned on its head from being in one central safe location to now being everywhere and accessible 24/7. That really meant it was much easier for attackers to get in. Really, all they need now to get in is a username and password. And I think already we've spoke about how those credentials, that username and password, can be breached via various different mechanisms, whether that's disclosed in a phishing email, reused from other sites. But all it takes is that email to be compromised, and they're into the business, and they are effectively you. What they do with that then is what causes the damage. Now, financial fraud is arguably a large one, and I think as John showed in his example, we're seeing an awful lot of invoice tampering. Effectively, is probably the best way of me wording it. Somebody modifying the payment details, all of those sort of things, which eventually mean that financial information, so payments, are either sent to the wrong place or money is sent to someone who doesn't really need it, which ultimately means that somebody has lost out. And then the other place that they can get money out of you as a business is through ransom. This has been ongoing probably for the last 6 years or so. Ransomware is where we effectively put a padlock on your files and hold you at ransom until you pay us money. Now, this used to be, once again, a really simple technique. They'd break into your computer system, they encrypt all of your files, i.e. they prevent you from accessing them, and then they basically put a price on them to say, if you want to access your files again, you need to pay us a certain amount of money. Now, the problem is the world responded to that, and we all got better, and we started doing backups, and we did recovery. So even ransomware in itself has changed over the last couple of years, and now they don't just encrypt your data, they also steal your data. They'll take it away, and as Matt said in his first example, they'll threaten to publish that data on the dark web or out on the internet, so that all of the data you hold on your customers or your staff is possibly going to be public. So they've changed this from an availability impact to now a confidentiality impact. So cyber trends are always evolving, but actually at the raw level, they're not changing a huge amount. It's just sophistication.
That's it, isn't it? I think the first example of phishing came through the Royal Postal Service in America, wasn't it? Where they used to put like letter scams into people's mail and then get them to pay off the back of it, which is exactly the same, like you say, around financial fraud, getting somebody to pay something you're not going to. Now, I think with all of this, and we always see, I suppose, blending into that film versus reality section, you always hear about the worst possible situations, which is where I'm going to bring Matt in because he's heavily involved in a lot of these as well. So I think, Matt, do you want to chat through the sort of the examples that Tom mentioned and what you've seen, maybe looking at a financial fraud example and then going down the ransomware route as well?
Yeah, I think from like a financial fraud point of view, the worst, well, not the worst one, but the most recent one we've kind of had insight on is where the landlord for a certain company has sent over the normal invoice on the same date, all perfectly fine. But unfortunately, the landlord then got compromised. They understood what was being sent out on that day, and they saw that this invoice was sent. About 2 or 3 days later, another email came through from that same person saying that the bank details have been changed, and the bank details change document was the exact same branding but with new bank details. Because what they've done, they've got the template from their SharePoint area and just changed the bank details and just said, look, this is the new ones. But if you looked at that email, you could see some really key differences. So there were some actual key people from the supplier landlord company CC'd, they were all removed from the company, from their email address, but a new email was brought in as a CC, and we classed that as malicious email, and was used really to track the communication. And unfortunately for this company, they did pay around about £15,000 out to that one single invoice. So that was kind of a big one-off, and it was quite a quick period all this happened. And then moving on to ransomware, which is really the worst case scenario. It's just sometimes it can be for a lot of companies, the end, well, not a lot, but some at the end of the road. We've seen a couple of companies actually go into administration because of it. But ransomware, if people don't know what that is, it's just like a piece of malware software that someone might download or get given, and then that will encrypt your files, which means then you can't access them anymore. They'll then say, look, you need to pay us 10, 50,000. The worst I was on, I think it was 1.2 million, 1.3 million as a ransom. And until you pay that, you can't get your files back. So it really does kind of stop everything. And yeah, it's just the worst thing you'll see if you ever, hopefully you never get impacted by it. But if you do, it's not great. So what you're about to listen to here is actually one of the tactics these ransomware groups will use. These ransomware groups, they are like any other business you might have interacted with, but they obviously are on the dark web side of things, and they'll have support teams, tech teams. They'll have these emails. Actually, before I go on, John, do you want to play the voice before I go on to the next slide?
I'm pretty sure you're aware of what's going on with your company right now. And sure you're aware of current situation, that you guys lost everything. So if you need decryption key, and if you don't want us to publish your sensitive information, like anywhere, you should get in touch with us. There's an encrypted chat. There's a chat for any questions, like proof, like anything, get in touch.
So as you heard there, it sounds really fake, but this was an actual recording from a ransomware. So they obviously have an AI generated voice sitting on that was then sent to the company. This was sent to everyone in the company, and the reason why they do that is just to cause panic, right? It's putting pressure on everybody to actually start paying or actually interact with the attackers. The next slide, so you'll see this is like a chat. So again, like any other kind of company you've dealt with online, there's a little chat function where you can talk to these people, and they are talking like any other company you've probably talked to before. You know, they welcome you to the chat. They say, look, give us a couple of minutes, we'll get back to you. And this is it. This is the normal kind of stuff that we see day in, day out. You can see at the bottom of that kind of screen as well, we've got a website that we use actually quite a bit because it's really interesting. We get to see certain bits of information, but ransomware.live. So whoever's interested, go there and have a look. But what that shows you is actual live companies who have just been ransomwared, how many people are ransomware every year. So if you're interested in that, yeah, have a look. And then the next one is this email. So again, this was an actual email that was sent to all staff. Very similar tactics to what the phone call does. So what they did here was send everybody in the company their pictures of files that they took. So in this case, they took everything from passports, birth certificates, they took banking documents, driving licenses, everything, right? Just to cause the panic and fear in people so they actually start talking to everybody.
Yeah, that's great. And I suppose from what we've kind of gone through there, I mean, what sort of advice have you got from a business perspective for it all, Matt? Like, is there anything that we can sort of advise? I mean, you can't protect against ransomware if it's in, but like...
No, you can't. But it's more of if you ever do get impacted by ransomware, it's just staying calm. It's the key thing. It's why people bring us in as that calm head. It's very emotional. I always remember a case that we dealt with back in COVID where I jumped on a call and just big Welsh burly man, and he was just in tears, right? Because his whole company has just been pretty much wiped out, and he's no clue where to start. So just stay calm. there are people out there. There's people like us. We would always help in those cases where we can. But there's also kind of governmental public organizations like the ICO, so the Information Commissioner's Office, Action Fraud, local police. So the last one I dealt with, which was in London, the Met Police got involved, and they will give you certain bits of advice. They may have dealt with a certain similar incident in the past. So there's a lot of help around, really.
I think that's it, isn't it? Like the top slide says, I mean, it's almost the advice of having that don't worry about the time pressure situation, you know, and reaching out to those more knowledgeable people than yourselves, and that's where we can help as well. I said, like you said, Matt, some of the incidents we've been on, the advice from the NCSC, so a National Cybersecurity Centre, the police involved, have been really, really good. Obviously, nobody wants this to happen to anyone. So everyone wants to, and this is where the user awareness stuff comes in as well, right? We want to make sure that people are aware of how to protect themselves as best as possible, so that we can limit these types of things happening as well. Just trying to think where we're up to in terms of our slides now. I think this comes back to you, Tom. Oh no, we've got another quiz now, so I'm going to have to try and pretend I remember another presenter. So next quiz question to come in, again, fastest fingers on the buzzers, is if you can name one of the recent cyber trends that we're seeing, and I'm also going to chuck in a Brucey bonus because I think I've said it enough, of if you can say how much that financial fraud example was from Matt, we'll put another giveaway in. I'm looking at my marketing team now going,
such a tough question.
Oh, so the one that was the financial fraud that was given to the organization where Matt said about them jumping into the emails and having that copy put in as well.
Yeah, we got it.
Oh, there we go. There's the first one. Perfect. So yeah, so I think where we'll go to next is probably back to yourself, Tom, and sort of a more of an awareness and prevention side of things. So what do you think of the areas of defensive prevention that you need to have? And is this sort of for individuals, businesses? What do you reckon?
I think the honest answer is it applies to both individuals and businesses alike. I think the fundamentals of security are to add a layered defense, or what we traditionally refer to as a defense in depth strategy. Any one of these layers, poor passwords, multi-factor authentication holes, someone missing an alert, for example, every one of these layers is going to fail at some point. None of them are perfect. But having a multitude of layers in terms of your preventative strategy are all there to make you more secure. So I think fundamentally for me, all users, whether they're part of a business or just on your own, the first thing is to set secure passwords, and that means basically using a password manager. For every site that you have, enable multi-factor authentication if it's available, because that adds that second line of defense should your username and password be compromised. Then for businesses, where possible, implement monitoring. So not just letting the user do that, but also implement your own controls in place to ensure that abnormal activity is going to be detected. So looking at your access log, not just looking at what was successful, but also looking at what was unsuccessful. See if you can spot trends of who's being targeted. The same thing happens in your personal life. As an example, if you start receiving emails from Facebook or Twitter saying somebody has put in a request to reset your password, instantly you should be a little bit more on edge, because at that point, maybe are you being targeted? Is somebody actively trying to break into your account? And at that point, maybe it's worth thinking about rotating back to the beginning, making sure you have got strong, unique passwords in every location. And then last but not least, it's policies and procedures. I mean, a good business will hopefully have a range of procedures in place across social media policies, financial transactions, and all of those have been designed really to prevent these sort of attacks being successful. The key thing is not to fall outside of those procedures. So despite if it's the CEO telling you something needs to happen urgently or you're going to lose a contract, those time pressures, those bits that are trying to make you break from normal activity are the bits really that tend to cause the problems. So really, if you're going to justify this in 3 words, it's to stop, it's to think, and then once you know where you are, it's to be able to sort of put it all together and verify what you're about to do is right.
Yeah, that's it. Now, I am very conscious that there's a minute left as well, up to the hour. We did start at 5 past, so I think that gives us 6 minutes. But for anyone who does have to leave, completely understand. But this recording will be sent out to people as well, so you can always catch the last 5 minutes there. Just wanted to chuck that in before we move on to the next bit. So, I suppose with yourself, Matt, and you know that I'm going to ask you this question because it gets brought up in every webinar we ever see. It's on every sort of LinkedIn post now as well.
Everything.
AI.
Yeah.
Where do you think this fits into it? Is it going to save everyone from all of these? Is it going to make a difference? What's your perspective?
From a kind of AI point of view, look, it is like keyword bingo, right? In cyber these days, AI is used everywhere. But for us, there's the pros and cons. So the con, obviously, is that AI is being used to circumvent defenses or create ways to actually initial attacks. So it could be them using it to create phishing emails, to create malware, to understand an environment and get around defenses. But also, AI is being stepped into how we monitor. So it could be an integration into kind of email systems to see if someone starts acting a bit weird, then AI might get used to that and go, oh, that's odd. Let's actually remove him, remove that user's access. Let's get it locked down quicker than what really maybe a human could do. Or it's that automated maintenance that we're going to see really through AI. But also it helps us in terms of understanding things where if any techie's on the kind of phone on the call, you'll know that if you need to find something out, you have to go on Google and search it up. But these days you've got a lot of kind of AI generated kind of searches where you can ask it certain questions. Don't take what you get as an answer as kind of, as everything as it being true, but it does help us kind of get to an answer for something really quickly.
Perfect. No, that's great. And I think so. We're coming towards the end now. So I think we're from a recap perspective, and there's a lot we've kind of covered in this webinar. So I'll try and recap this all and go to Matt and Tom for their final thoughts as well. But I think we've given, well, hopefully, let's put that in there. We've given you an insight into sort of fiction versus reality. So what we see on a daily basis is what's portrayed in the media. And then we've also given you advice there around the sort of the user awareness, that cyber awareness piece as well, which 9 times out of 10 can be really, really big benefit for a lot of the incidents that we see is having that piece there. So a strong password, spotting phishing, putting multi-factor authentication on accounts, following processes, not blindly trusting what's in front of you and going to the source, and not sharing everything you do online with everyone possible. I mean, Tom, Matt, is there anything else that you can think of that I haven't recapped on?
I think from me, it's just always keeping your wits about you. I think you've nailed all the key points. We're coming up to the Christmas period, so I'll be happy for some and sad for others. But I'm expecting to see quite a large increase in things like smishing attacks around delivery companies, as a good example. So there are going to be waves throughout the year, depending on what's going on. So just keep your wits about you and stop, think, and verify where you need to.
Yeah, definitely. To touch on Tom's point, right? The one I just had was the winter kind of fuel allowance text. I had that the other day, right? So that's one that's going around. So just if you don't think something is real or there's something that's off, just get it checked, ask somebody. And when it comes to being impacted by these sorts of things, ask for help. There's companies like us, or just come to us really, but companies like us which can help and we love to help. So really just get in touch.
That's it, isn't it? And I think the more aware you are, the better it is. And I always think, and I think, Tom, you've talked to me about this in the past, like with phishing emails and stuff like that, if it is genuine, they'll come and they'll try and get in touch with you another way. Like, phones aren't broken. People can still have phone calls. It's not, completely obsolete yet. So if there's somebody who's trying to contact you about something urgent, they can get in touch through that way as well. So it is, I think we've had the term used to us as scary, but assuring that there are people out there that can help. As I said, anything you need from us, then we're always around to provide that guidance as well. So I suppose next steps, and I saw there was a couple of questions on this as well within there. Is firstly, I suppose we want to thank you all for your time today, and thank you for listening to us to run through this. As you can probably tell, me, Matt, and Tom could have stayed here for about 3 or 4, 5, 6 hours, days, going through all of this because it's stuff that we love to talk about, and it's really helpful, really good to sort of present what we find to people. Before anyone does mention it as well, this QR code is legitimate. It will take you to the PureCyber website, regardless of what Tom said earlier, and I will put my hand on heart and I promise that it is in. It goes straight to there because I checked it last night. Again, with all of this, so we want everyone within this webinar to be part of this community to raise cyber awareness. We want you all to be cyber champions when you go back to your businesses and when you want to share this with people internally, because that's what our aim is. The more awareness we have as an organization, the more we can give, then the better equipped people are to deal with these situations, and that's what we want. My family hate me for it, because whenever they talk to me about anything security related, I go off on one. But that's what we do. And Matt's laughing because he's probably done exactly the same with his family, and Tom's laughing because he probably does exactly the same as well. Again, with the next step, so if you want to book in a call with our team, if you'd like to discuss your cyber needs further, so you've got the QR code there, which will take you through to a landing page and give you advice around. So we've got a new service that's being delivered called Cyber Health Check. It will give you that rundown as to where you are as an organization, and provide you with that sort of overview around your defenses, for that side of things as well. Trying to think if I've forgotten anything and looking at my marketing team to see if I have. We look out for your post-event info as well. So we'll be sending out a pack to you. We'll be sending out additional resource, a recording of this Ignite webinar. We'll be getting in touch with anyone who's won any of the prizes. And I believe that is pretty much it. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us for PureCyber Ignite. Matt's getting a message from another marketing team now, so maybe there is something we've forgotten. Is there anything, Matt?
No, we've got everything. It's just that cyber champion bit which you've gone through already.
Yeah. Cool, perfect. So yeah, sign up to be that Pure Cyber champion, get your joining pack, get more involved, and always stop, think, and verify is our message for today. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
See you soon.